Right. No dissenting voices.
Great.
Great. Okay, we move on to item 7, which is the external auditor's report. We've got a number of supplementary papers which have been laid around. I'm going to be very honest here and say that I missed the link because my papers were in black and white rather than being coming highlighted in blue, because I know it is the people who use iPads. So I did, when I got home at midnight last night, go and look at it, having been reading the papers all evening. And I'm not sure what I would have done had I found the 119-page report as an appendix to read in that sort of way. So we've got that. Which officers are going to talk to?
Mr. Chair, sorry, I realise I should have declared an interest. I'm a governor of Cumberland's for First Law and Topics.
Well, I think most of us are governors of all sorts of schools. And I think if that's recorded in the, we will record every school governors, every time the report like this comes up.
It's just good practice to declare it, when you realise that you have an interest.
We were told not to declare it.
Sorry?
We were told specifically not to declare it because I was declaring mine.
So I haven't told anyone.
This is what we were told by committee, then that's why I stopped doing it.
Okay. It's up to you whether you do it or not.
Yeah, I can do it, I'm just letting you know what happened in the previous committees.
Is this because they're named schools that were actually audited during the year?
Yeah.
Because in fact the audit process can call on any school at any time. So in theory, any school or any organisation with any of us involved could in that way.
It's on the register of interest anyway, on the website, so it's declared from there on.
Yeah, it's voluntary.
I don't mind, I just need to know whether we need to do it.
If you want to declare that's fine. None of the schools that I'm involved in are listed on that page, on page 43. Arjun, are you involved in one?
Yeah, Barnet's the school government.
Right.
Oh,
That's a pensions fund thing, what is it? Which one are we looking at?
Well, the one that was raised was specifically the list of schools there, the scheduled bodies.
Yeah, that's for the pension fund.
Yeah, so that's what the pension fund. Yeah, well, all that stuff, right. Okay, so there's
Well, I declare my interest, Dulwich Junior
there's
Corporation.
another report about audits of schools.
So I need to get up until...
Dulwich Junior Corporation.
Right. Have we all got all the other bits of paper that have been circulated? Apart from that one, the audited accounts, the auditor's report, which is an opinion, and the audit findings on the pension fund. Okay. Chris? You want to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair. So presenting to you this evening the audited financial statements, recognising this is an important part of our governance cycle for the year. And I guess our final accounts don't quite have the same sort of moment of truth that a publicly listed company might do. So our share prices are unlikely to plummet or rise as a result of the publication this evening, but they are an important part of our financial management cycle, which starts, I guess, with the publication of our budget and medium-term financial plan each year, our corporate plan, when we monitor that plan during the course of the year, quarterly in public, and then when we receive the year-end position, which we did just a few weeks ago at the inaugural meeting of the Performance and Contracts Committee. And I guess if nothing else, what these accounts do is demonstrate to you, to the public, to me and fellow officers that the core ingredients of that medium-term financial plan and our budget are materially accurate. And so if I was to draw you anywhere, I guess, within what is a substantial and at times slightly baffling set of documents, I draw your attention to the reported underspend at the end of the year, which occurs with what we reported to the Performance and Contracts Committee a few weeks ago, that we have delivered the financial year in line with the expectations of the medium-term financial plan, particularly in relation to our year-end reserves position. And noting, of course, that during the course of 2012-13, the Council needs to deliver some £14.5 million worth of savings. Evidently that has been achieved as noted in these accounts. Just to put that in some context for a moment, so since 2010, we delivered getting on 40 million of savings, and another 30 or so to come over the next 2 years. And as we reported to Quality and Resources Committee at the start of June, another 70 or so million of savings to take place towards the end of the decade. So just to put that in some simple language, I guess we are about a third of the way through the journey that we think we need to make before 2019-20. A couple of other observations I'd like to make, Chair, if I may, before I hand over to colleagues from Grant Thornton. First is that we were the second council in London to close our accounts this year, and to do so, noting the audit report in Winter 2 without any material errors. That, for those of you familiar with local authority account closure processes, is a reasonably unheard of outcome. For those of you who are competitive, the council who got their accounts closed first, it's 2 days before we did, got completed 14 material errors in their financial statement. So, nothing else, I would like to just record my thanks to the finance team who closed the accounts, and in particular to through it on my left, Vicky Morris, and to Ian Miller, who's sat down there at the moment, in a moment turns around to come and sit up, just in case there are any questions in relation to Ian. But also to our auditors who have worked diligently and swiftly. Final point, Chair, is that, of course, we achieved this audit and closure this year in what was a tumultuous year for the finance service. So it transferred to Capita in September. Now, the closure process was run by CSG. During that time, a new management team was recruited by CSG to deliver the finance service. Mr. Bugle was part of that process. The new finance system was implemented at the end of the year. And of course, there were very significant savings within that contract that needed to be achieved, which meant a lot of change for the finance service as indeed a number of the services that transferred. So, in all of that context, I think these are, both in terms of outcome and process, is all we can be pleased with tonight, and I would like to personally say thank you to all involved in that process.
Well, thank you. I'm sure members would want to be associated with that. Thanks. It's not been an easy year. I think those of us who've been around for a long time would appreciate that. And to have got this out in this way with the auditors being so happy, I think is very good news for the authority. Who wants?
Auditors so happy. This is the face of happy auditors.
Yeah. There's a joke this which of you wants to have a few words?
I'm happy to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. To introduce the report quickly and then obviously to take any questions at the end. The executive summary is on page 77 of your pack. At the time of writing the report, clearly we were still completing some of the main audit work. So there's a few bullet points there and some touchdowns and things. Essentially, just to update that now, we still just need to complete the finalised our internal review process, but the major testing has been completed out of the way, and in line with the original timetable, we're anticipating end of July sign-off. As Chris has mentioned, we haven't identified any any adjustments to the reported financial position. And over the page on page 78, we've just highlighted a couple of key messages that have come out of the audit, none of which is creating any element. We've also provided a draft audit opinion which came around with the accounts. That's unqualified and unmodified. The one point is to note at the bottom of that opinion is you'll see there's a certificate which means we cannot certify the accounts audit as complete until we've completed both our review of the whole of government accounts, which is reliant on guidance and requirements which have not yet been provided to us as auditors. The pack has been completed by the council, but we can't audit it until we have the guidance we're required to audit it against. And also we are required to consider the objection which we've just received, an alleged objection which we've just received. So we'll consider that part of the certification and appraisal process. Just moving through the report to page 82. At this point in the report, we report our findings against significant risks and then findings against other risks. So this all aligns with our audit plan, which we presented to the committee back in April. We've reported against each of the areas that we looked at, and I think just to summarise, there's no significant issues from that work that I need to draw to your attention. Carrying on through, the second area of our work is the value for money opinion. Here we've completed again the work as we identified in our audit plan. From that, there's no significant issues that we've identified, and the accounts opinion is an unqualified opinion that we're proposing to provide for that. Again, there's some detail included in the report on the findings and the work we've done. I won't take you through that in any detail, but if there are any questions on the content, we're happy to take those. The final point I just wanted to raise before I hand over for questions is Appendix C on page 110, which is the letter of representation. This is a standard letter of representation that we will require to be signed on our purpose, alongside the accounts and the committees for any issues with anything that's included within that. Just to close, I'd just like to thank the Council and the Finance team for all their help in completing the audit to us just at an early time scale, and then to invite any questions from members.
Okay, my thanks to Council staff, of course, extends to yourselves as well, because if the auditors and the council officers aren't working well together, or we can't achieve getting accounts signed off in a timely way, we clearly have. Questions on the accounts, Peter?
On the accounts, you at the beginning, I was beginning to question the numbers. There's something called the explanatory forward, which I assume is an attempt to help people understand the material which occurs thereafter. I just have a couple of questions about that. On page 2, where you've got the two tables, the first one I think is very clearly next to what was made before.
On page 2.
Yes. The actual expenditure was extremely close to budget and very well controlled. The table below that shows an improvement in something of about £74 million. And looking through the rest of the accounts, it's clear that the cash balance was significantly improved during the year. The reserves, the usable reserves as opposed to the unusable reserves went up by about £50 million. And I just wondered whether, in terms of explaining what the benefit of that was, or whether there was no benefit at all, it might merit just a few words, given these are very large numbers relative to the accounts.
So effectively, the two numbers that you referred to, the first one that Chris referred to earlier was the one that was represented to the performance of the contract management committee a few weeks back, reported £120,000 underspend within the council. Obviously, as Chris did say earlier, there is a note further on in the accounts that does explain how we moved from that reporting position to members into how it then affects into the accounts itself. So I draw your attention to note 29 that starts on page 49 of this document. And that effectively goes through a series of adjustments of how we come from that 120,000 underspend that each reporting members. All the accounting adjustments that do go through in terms of various internal group charges, adjustments that we make in respect of the pension fund within our accounts and capital charges. And in effect, we do end up with that summary table at the bottom. So it would be normal practice to put that table within that document. Obviously, just gives that further breakdown as to what's in note 29, as to how you move from one position to another. But I would say that the note 29 starts on page 49 through to page 52 does make all the breakdown as to how we get from one table to the other. And that's just the summary document coming through. A few words I use.
I'm not suggesting that the numbers are wrong in any sense at all. What I'm suggesting is that if they are sufficiently important to put in the explanatory forward, and if there is something like an £80 million difference between the 2 years, whereas we think it's important to refer to the £120,000 difference between the budget and the actual, but we don't think it's worth explaining to people what an £80 million difference means in the comprehensive income and expenditure. And what I'm suggesting is that if this is an explanatory forward, which is intended to help people understand the accounts, it seems to me that it is 100 times more significant to explain what the difference between the 58 million and the minus 24 million is than between the 292,972 and the 292,864. If we are trying to focus on transparency, because I'm not sure that I understand whether the 58 million is good news or bad news. It feels from all the other numbers to be actually quite good news, but it would be interesting just to get a brief comment on that.
So, I mean, the adjustments within that note are adjustments, as it says, adjustments required by statute or reporting standards. I mean, in terms of an explanation, I mean, I suppose the council could add an additional narrative underneath that to explain what the key movements are. You can see from the numbers above what some of the major movements are. So, for example, you've got your revaluation on non-current assets, and a significant movement year on year in that. Then your gains and losses on the pension fund show two of the most significant movements. So they're sort of taken out as effectively they're taken out of the main numbers as they're almost outside of the council's control. I mean, that is a standard documentation that we see in all accounts.
The key point there is, and it's the one we're making, which is if this is the explanatory forward, it should explain. I don't think we can't really argue with that.
I think that's their comment. Perhaps it needs another note added.
I think we can change it, Chair. This is sure. So my explanatory forward, so we can change that.
Yeah, of that 58 million, there's 67 million to do with the pension fund.
If there was a reversal of 70, there's all sorts
No,
of things going on.
I understand that. The general public wouldn't stand a chance in hell of understanding.
The second question I have is on, again, on the explanatory forward on page 4, which is we've got a nice table showing what the council owns and what the council owes. And within the table of what the council owns, you've got 3% of cash and cash equivalents. Now, that's slightly odd. I mean, maybe it's just the classification and you meant overdrafts, but it's very odd that you would owe cash and cash equivalents, which would normally be an asset, not a liability.
Sure, someone's going to
That's right.
Chair, I'm Ian Dunn, Head of Treasury. The Council's cash position, its net position, is not overdrawn on a day-by-day basis, but there are still balances which is money owed to the state. So when you present the accounts at year end, you do end up showing an overdraft position, but the net position of the Council is that it is in cash surplus.
So just to be clear, again, as this is explanatory forward rather than it might be easier for people to understand if that box was called overdrafts or short-term borrowings or something, because I think that's what you just said it is.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Okay. We go down the table. Cameron.
Thank you. Can I associate yourself with Councillor Zinkin just said very much. First of all, congratulations on putting this together in the way you said, very, very efficiently indeed. And I would say any congratulations on the outcomes. Any fair-minded person looking at the top of page 2 would have to say that our budgetary control in this year is excellent. I entirely agree that this needs to be, this business of the explanatory forward needs to be thought through. Perhaps for this year some things could be added, but I think as an ongoing project it would be very worthwhile putting in time and effort to look at considerably expanding and developing that whole part of it. What Councillor Zinkin was basically saying is, look, one of the things that I think came up in the discussion was, which wasn't understood perhaps, was we don't just need to know, are these numbers accurate? We believe them to be accurate. We're totally convinced of that. Is that a good thing, a bad thing, or a meaningless thing? And that's a subjective judgment, and that doesn't have to be a particularly political thing, but it requires some sort of narrative, discursive, qualitative thing. And it's not the place for that is right here, and that has not been done by and large. And when you have an annual report for a company, that is exactly the purpose of the statement of the chief executive, CFO, etc. Now, a lot of companies that turns into just standard boilerplate, and but the idea is to provide that precise kind of, well, you and I own this company, and here's what's actually going on in these numbers. And you can look at later on and see if that's really a reasonable way of representing it or not. Got all the data, but I mean, if you were to say that this document is the most important document that we produce as a council, for us as members on this committee and for the whole of the council to understand, and yet it is very hard to understand. Well, some of that is it just has to be hard to understand because that's the law of how you set these things out. But the front part of it doesn't have to be hard to understand at all. And I think it would deserve work. I think that also the visual display here is really mediocre. We shouldn't be seeing pie charts made into 3D things flipped on their side and then turned into percentages. So if you look at the pie chart on the top of page 3, you've got a sort of lilac blob that's 1% and a crimson blob on the right hand side that's 6%, and the 1% thing actually visually looks larger than the 6%, and that's just the sort of distorted result you get when you do this kind of thing. You want a bar chart for that, and you want numbers as well as percentages, and then you can actually get some sort of visual representation of the numbers that are in the book. Stuff like that, I think, is really worth thinking through, because this is how we as representatives of the public and the public as well can actually get to grips with how we're performing as a council. And personally, I think it's very important because this is such a positive message. At least in terms of the budget control, there's a very clear positive message, I think it's really worth having that made clear.
Thank you for that. We'll work on now. Let me just say, welcome two of our new members, and it's always interesting to have new faces around the place, adding something new to things that probably people who've been around too long take for granted. That's good. Let's work on that and come back. Sorry.
Sorry, you with them. 2 points. One, it's on page 79.
So you want 79?
About that, the disability grant of. Okay?
79.
Yeah, about that.
Right. 79.
Yeah, you can't, you know, the left is statement performance element for the traffic user council obviously against the backdrop of change, etc. And then it goes on to say management must continue to focus on maintaining the controls in place as a number of systems undergo further changes. Now that's been one of our worries from previous committees as well, with all this change happening. Where and how and when do we get the assurance this is happening? Do we get it during this current session? Do we wait till the end of the year before it all goes wrong or before it all goes well? How do I know? Do I have to wait 12 months? Second point, minor point on page 108. I think you've got a time to
We'll
go down
do all the
to
first one first.
Okay.
No.
Thank you, Chair. So just to reassure you that as part of the 14-15 internal audit plan, we've got resource in there to look at the key financial systems, which are I think that's the key changes that our committee are referring to. So we'll be auditing them as we would have in any other year.
No, so the point I'm making is, I understand that from past experience. You will produce a report every quarterly to this committee.
Yes.
Would that be included in that? That's
That
what I'm
would.
trying to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a title on page 108, item 3.
So this is some sort of interaction between the pension fund and the general fund. It's 10 million this past year and 28 million previously. Could we have some explanation as to how those numbers arise?
Pension fund and general fund don't get survived.
Too loud?
These are reflections of accounting adjustments which have to be made annually and are made by the actuary to reflect assets and liabilities of the pension fund. There will be movements between years depending on the market value of the pension fund and actuarial assumptions on future cash flows towards the pension fund.
So do I understand it then that these monies are going out of the general fund in order to ensure that the pension fund can cover its liabilities? Is that what's happening?
It's a snapshot of the liabilities of the pension fund at one point in time, and these will change over time.
Certainly from my experience, Jeff, there have been occasions in the past when we've gone 7 years with a holiday for making contributions into the pension fund. I'm going back a few years. Is that right?
That was a considerable number of years ago, and the regulations governing management of pension funds have changed to prevent that happening again.
Perhaps it's the terminology. It's talking about gains and losses rather than contributions to pay out pensions. So, I mean, is this something to do with the performance of the stock market? Is it something to do with what the actuary says the council needs to do to cover the liabilities, or what is it?
Can you take that point away and clarify it for me? You said it clarified the pension fund as well, so next week.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm at a disadvantage, Mr Chairman, because I've not been able to receive my emails, councillor emails for some time, so I didn't get this via email. And the business continuity rather fell apart yesterday and today because of the cut in the power at the London Business Park, and so I couldn't get my laptop back and or my iPad back. So this is the first time I've seen it.
Okay, if you do have any questions that you want to ask afterwards,
I just got a business continuity point which I'm
don't hesitate. Well, when you go home and take that, isn't this 115 odd pages? If you've got any questions, do feel free to ask them on officers. Arjun?
Well, can I suggest that these kind of pages are made available to us as early as possible?
Well,
Can I ask a really boring question about page 17, about the heritage assets? You don't hold some of the heritage assets on balance sheet because of cost information, etc. Do you have a list of what those assets are, and do you justify to the auditors why? I mean, apart from the reason given here, but why those particular heritage assets you can't get a valuation for? And do you have any examples? I can't think of what we, apart from what former no description councillor Coleman calls the civic tax in the other room, which are the former mayoral change. I really don't know what other heritage assets we've got.
I think the heritage assets accounting policy that we have adopted is in line with previous years. We've not provided the committee a breakdown of what heritage assets we do have in our accounts and the further register that we have got of assets that we don't include. As part of preparing the statements, then the accountants do make a decision with the various values that we do have. We know about heritage assets as to whether there are material movements in their value or whether some in fact are invaluable and therefore can't be used in accounts. And as part of that review, we take back a grant form to as the audit. I'm happy to circulate the list of what's in it and isn't included throughout as far as we're aware.
Hang on a second, I'm not sure I understood the answer to that, because I'm not sure what qualifies as a heritage asset. Arjun's question was, can you give us some examples of what a heritage asset? I sit on a trust which has 55 almshouses, some of which are 400 years old, which are in the books for nil value because they can't be sold. Are we talking about stuff like that, or what?
No, as far as I believe, to what I expect in this area, our property itself is included within our fixed assets as we've gone through around property. These are the assets like the mayoral chains and other items that will be held in this building.
We don't own mayoral chains, why are they on our balance sheet?
Oh, okay. They're not significant.
List here.
Well, if you could circulate a list of members.
Fair enough, I would say. Moving on, I did just want to, can I pick up a point? Sorry.
I'll come back to that.
Unless you want to
I was going to say something about heritage assets. I mean, if we go to authority, there's a vast amount of heritage assets. If you were asked to go into your basement, I don't know if you've got one, you'll find all sorts of heritage assets that are incapable of valuation but are absolutely priceless. They're paintings from 1763, 1642, they're covered in dust. It's very difficult to value them. And they're the sort of things that come in the category of heritage assets. So when property is normally valued at some sort of rebuild or market cost, even if it's a guild or market heritage. These will be a great variety of things that we've accumulated over the last 500 years.
Actually, let me tell you a story. The first duty of every mayor after they've been elected is to go and visit the mortuary, because it's at the mortuary that all that stuff is kept, and the mayor then decide which bits he wants to have in the power during his mayoral year.
So many jokes on today. I could do that. It's Councillor Natalie, who's the former stand-up comedian. I can roll off a few.
I know, I've seen it before, it's very funny.
I'll tell you so that. Turning, well, I've said that to you on a number of occasions as well. Turning on to our main agenda, page 101, I just want to pick up at something that Mr. Dishman raised in his raise a couple of questions, which was about the contract that NSL had with their bailiffs. I was surprised that we don't keep copies of contracts that contracted partners.
Third-party contract.
Yes, thank you. Bit late for me. Third-party contracts. Well past it. I'm surprised we don't keep copies of those, because they do relate to business that affects our residents and things like that. What is that normal? I mean,
Your mic's off. It's in camera. It's in camera.
Is it normal to keep third-party contracts?
These are contracts that people we contract with, who they contract with.
Yes.
I wouldn't normally expect that we would retain copies of contracts that our contractors enter into.
or even though they're related to, I mean, that really does surprise me, actually, because, given some of the stuff that we raise, as an aside, we've done stuff on paying living wage to people, and surely if we don't have that, we don't have sight of the contracts.
We've not applied living wage in our third-party supply chain. We've applied it to directly employed staff only.
Yes, but that is, but potentially that could be a decision that's taken later on. But we wouldn't have that level of information. I have to say I'm quite surprised by that.
But if we ask our supply chain to enforce the living wage in their contracts, in their contract, it's quite a complex activity.
I just use that as an example. As an example, somewhere where council policy is affected further down as a policy. As I say, I'm surprised we don't keep copies of those contracts just to see. Isn't there? I don't want to make an allegation for it, but isn't there the possibility that something might crop up if we don't have copies of their contracts?
I'm not surprised that we don't keep them original.
I'd just say that it's a matter of commercial confidentiality for some parts, and anything else the people that you contract with won't want to tell you necessarily what's in the contracts they've got with the people that are going to supply to them, that they're going to supply to you. And it's usual not to have those, but you would usually, I'm sure you have, bind them into the important conditions within your main contract, which then will reflect into the subcontract. And in the case of enforcement agents anyway, they're registered enforcement agents and will be governed very shortly by a very detailed set of Ministry of Justice regulations, which actually will change the way they operate and reflect really the way that you can operate with them. So I think you tie them up in another way, but I wouldn't expect any council to know subcontract terms and conditions. For that reason, it's commercially confidential.
We may want to know that there's difference to policy of keeping, for the reasons you outlined, contractors' contract.
In fact, given the number of people we contract with, the majority of them will probably be subcontracting parts. Then you just look at the building industry and the amount of building work that's being done on the council, right away across the council. If we had copies of every subcontract that the building contractors worked into, we'd have a whole army of people charged, because at the council taxpayers' expense, just monitoring those subcontracts, which isn't cost effective. Anyway,
I understand the cost. I do think it's important that we know who's working on behalf of the council, because otherwise we have got exactly the problem that this edition raised about the bailiffs contracted by NSF.
yeah, I think that there is an argument that where someone is effectively directly representing the council, as opposed to a blanket, because in one of Mr. Lishman's questions about the reputation of the council being at stake, and then we might want to have a greater look at the way in which they're working. But as a generality, I don't think that's feasible.
But in your main contract, you didn't say that you have the right to approve the appointment, which means you would look, you do your due diligence on what sort of people they were appointing as subcontractors, without necessarily knowing the detail of the subcontract, and that would be the usual basis for doing these things.
And we do have the power to kick out if they screw up, as clearly happened in one case. Richard, do you have any other questions?
I've just got one very minor question, which I'm sure will trouble nobody, but it's troubled me slightly, and that's on the audited accounts, this document. And it's page 42, and it's really notes 19 and 22 on page 43. I just wondered if somebody could explain to me the increase in debtors of almost 50% between 12, 13, 13 and 14. And there's two things to say about that. One, in the accounts it says they've been restated, but I think that's irrelevant. Just to tell you that I don't accept that's an answer, because I think that's irrelevant. And the second point, it says that the retrospective effect is to increase debtors matched by compensating adjustments to creditors. Well, my maths has never been very good, but the creditors go up by 7 million and the debtors go up by 47 million. And I wonder how compensating that is.
Someone like to answer that?
I'll try and answer that one anyway. Obviously, at the beginning of the last financial year, there was a change in non-domestic rates in terms of reporting between central government and local authority. In the sense of we are responsible for the protection of that debt, as we always have been, but we also carry the risk of the non-collection in terms of NNDR changes. That does account for the change within both the debtors balance and the creditors balance, because there are final adjustments made at year end as we go through the collection funds, how we are operating on behalf of central government around that. So also we have restated the 12-13 figures accordingly in comparison to last year for both 19 and 22. But it is predominantly around the non-domestic rates change in legislation.
I would have said that the non-domestic rate change may well be payments in advance figure, 1.9 to 30 million, giving you the benefit of the doubt. But I'm not entirely sure. What about the 67 to 81 for bodies expanded to central government? It just seems like a very large increase in debtors without explanation. And I think somewhere you ought to actually explain in words that people can understand why it is that you are owed so much money at the end of the year when you weren't the year before, even if it's a manufactured figure that you thought up during the accounts. It ought to explain things. It's glaringly different when you look at the numbers.
Sorry, to clarify, so the change in NDR is specifically in relation to the body's external, the body's external central government. The payment in advance for a significant increase is in relation to the accounting of the CSG contract, and then we agreed with the auditors as part of the closure process.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've got a point of procedure for you. As an independent member, the first I saw these accounts was when I turned up here this evening. And with the best will in the world, I can't speed read 116 pages, which it is clearly better than I am. You do have a typo on page 4 where somebody can't spell investment. My question is, what's the committee being asked to do? Actually approve or oversee these accounts, or just completely rely on the management representation of the work account Thornton? Because I feel that if the committee is being asked to approve the accounts, that I personally can't do that because I haven't read them, I haven't seen the reports.
I have a lot of sympathy.
Just for clarification.
Technically, we're being asked to approve.
Well, I don't think you can.
Yeah, so just to clarify, if the audit committee are being asked to approve, to give the chairman and Mr. Major as the section 151 to approval to approve the accounts. In terms of the process that needs to go through already, just to clarify, so on the 31st of May, the publication of the accounts was made public, and we started our inspection of the accounts period, in which case the accounts were published on the council's website, and now anyone legally realising by Barnet to raise any questions in relation to that. And we have a number of questions in from the public that the finance team have been resolving through that process. I would believe at that time that was shared with members at the same time that we have published them and were available. Obviously, when the papers were published, there was a link in there to the main statements itself. I also believe when the audit committee attended some training 2 weeks ago, we also circulated the further link, or it should have been circulated to reminding us of the committee that they had been published at that point in time. I believe that went to the minutes of the committee.
So is the issue here that there was a link, colleagues. So when the papers were dispatched, there was a link to the accounts, or the actual accounts were included in the pack?
No, the accounts weren't included in this pack. There was a link to the draft of the accounts. And the final accounts we've been given this evening. Am I right? Is that right?
And there's not much use in a link on a piece of paper. I mean, if you're sending people a pack of paper and somewhere in it there's a web link, it's not in any way obvious that you're supposed to go to your computer, pull up the web version of the document, click on the link and then find it. It should only be in the pack or
Because
it's not a meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a similar issue because of problems with council email. I've not had council email, and this is the first time I've seen this
One of the consequences if we don't, it's not that we're not approving them, it's we're just deferring approval until we've actually had a chance to read them.
Next meeting is November.
We have to reconvene and meet with the committee, so
Yeah.
it has to be approved before the end of September.
Sorry,
Yeah, when we had the audit committee training, after that, the link to the draft accounts was circulated to all members, as requested at the training, Chairman.
Yeah.
Excuse me, there was a circulated to me. Because we're independent members on the council's circulation list.
So it was circulated to all members.
Was it clear was it actually made clear in that circulation list that you were supposed to actually look at those and we discussed at this meeting? Because I have a huge amount of things to read, and unless it's specified, I need to read that.
So I missed it too. Maybe my.
Have another meeting then.
We have a choice, we have to sign them by the end of September.
I think the council's planning to sign by the end of this month. The end of September is the statutory deadline. The committee needs to approve the accounts so that the section 151 can sign the accounts. So that process has to be gone through.
So the committee can approve them pending any questions from the audit committee, and then if there are no questions,
I was going to suggest that we approve them in principle, and we've asked people to send in their questions, and you have a right then to have a special meeting if the questions are so fundamental, but subject to people being satisfied with the questions.
I think that's quite sensible. If people aren't happy with the answers they get to the questions they raise, then they can come back to me and I will call a special meeting, which will be before the beginning of September, so that if anyone should happen to want to refer it up to full council, that way in time, it will still be done.
I think they want to be signed by the end of, in the next couple of weeks.
Ultimately, from our viewpoint, we have to sign by the end of September, so it's, we can sign by the end of the month, which is the council's internal deadline, then we need to have that approval by then. So it's ultimately up to the council. It's only statutory commitment, it's given to September the 30th deadline.
I have no issues in reading these accounts over the next couple of days and providing the committee with any comments that I have. I'm sure that there won't be any, but the process has to be followed.
Sure. Arjun.
Thank you, Chair. Well, that doesn't modify me at all, to be perfectly honest. I mean, why do we bother calling it approving this? This is a rather stamping exercise more than anything else. You know, it seems like we've been told that if you don't approve this, you know, the apocalypse is on its way, whatever. But well, we're not doing our job if we just say, well, okay, this is fine, unless we've got some questions. You know, we're not happy with it. We just, you know, we just shouldn't approve them. If we have to convene another meeting, or so be it. But you know, it's not acceptable to me that you know members of the committee don't get a sight of the papers. Don't you know? We don't have a chance to go through this in the level of detail that I think members of the public would expect us to. Frankly, that most members of the committee are paid to. And then, you know, just a while to say, okay, we've got some questions afterwards. That's just possible. You can't do democratic decision making like that. And this ties exactly to what I said earlier on about transparent decision making. You know, this should be a fairly open and shut case. You know, we haven't had time or fair sight of these papers. To agree to something we haven't had a proper chance to scrutinise, I think is not transparent. It's not right.
So through you, Chairman, page 38 talks about the answer to 60 report and also refers quite clearly to where the accounts can be found to be scrutinised. Also, the committee had training on the 1st of July, so it was quite a long time ago. So in that time, there may have been IT issues, but I don't think that would have prevented the audit committee from reviewing those accounts during that time.
I'm sorry, I've not had access to my emails throughout that whole period.
Those people who don't have access to their emails should be able to download the files from mod.gov, where they should be listed clearly for each meeting. This file wasn't.
This one wasn't. No, it wasn't.
I've also just, so you know, Councillor Levine should have been able to go onto mod.gov, which should be either one of the document PDFs that was to be downloaded, or should be contained within one of the PDFs to be downloaded. Because that's the same practice that we follow in every committee. And the members of the public, I don't know how members of the public can easily get to this. Now, I've just checked my own email trail. As it happens, I specifically asked about the accounts process at the meeting. I sent him a follow-up email. I asked for a copy of those accounts. He said, yes, thank you. Thank you very much. He passed it on to a colleague, and a colleague sent me the link to this document to me. I don't see a record. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I don't see a record in my email trail, and I don't delete emails of any such email sent to the committee as a whole.
What said that in training? The information was sent also in the work program.
Excuse me, but I'm afraid that is not consistent with the email that I have here, which is from yourself. It's audit briefing slides. It has the member training and presentation, the work program, and the audit committee terms of reference. It does not include the draft accounts, I'm afraid.
I mean, something's clearly gone wrong here. Members of the committee feel they have not had access to the accounts at the time of the meeting. And we will need to go back and look at our processes. The bit that I find particularly troubling is that they've been on our website since May. There's been public notification about their existence. We've had, as exemplified at the start of the meeting, a number of public questions related to the accounts. We've had members of the public come in and view the accounts and view supporting documentation. And you know, I think it's disappointing in hindsight that the full pack was not sent as a PDF. That really would have helped, but
so it wasn't sent to us as a PDF to include within the account, within the papers of the committee. So the report that was given to governance was the report that was included tonight with the link that was approved by us.
I think I have to add, it comes back to what I was saying earlier, Chris, about stuff being on the website. Unless you're actually looking for it, you wouldn't go for it. I, for one, didn't know I was going to be on this committee until June the 1st. I think it was June the 1st. When was the annual meeting? June the 2nd.
Who can forget?
And certainly wasn't going looking for things in the middle of May, when frankly most of us had other things on our minds, like getting elected. I'm very conscious that members have not had the time to read this. To be honest, I'm happy to defer a decision on it. It will mean that we will have to call a special meeting, probably in the latter half of August, because I'm away for the first 2 weeks of August. I will have to check with people's diaries. But I would urge all members, if they have any questions or queries on the accounts, to write to any of the officers or the appropriate officers with those questions. Copy them to me, please, and they will copy the answers to me, so that when we do come to meet to approve the accounts, we don't have to go through every line of it at that time. So can we we will defer it, we'll have to come back to a special meeting. But officers, I do say this, particularly with long and complicated reports like this, if they're able to be circulated to members ahead of the rest of the papers going out, it improves our performance as members, because we've had a chance to study them.
Take a vote. Take a vote.
I know, I appreciate that's not always going to be possible. Sorry.
Are you deferring all of agenda item 7 or just
Yeah.
one?
Well, it all goes together.
I expected that, I'm just confirming it.
Yeah, it all goes together. Do you want to vote?
To vote.
Do you take a vote on it? Yeah? Okay, those in favour of deferring? That's everybody.
I'm not.
Oh, sorry, you're not.
My preference would be a more elegant solution where you see what comments actually come from people, because if it's not material, we should be able to approve the accounts.
That's I think would be difficult. But someone's got to make a decision as to someone wants to raise an objection to one thing as to whether that's significant or not.
I'm always prepared to be proved wrong, but in 30 years of doing this, I have to say that I can't ever remember there being a change to the accounts once we got to this stage. And I would take implicitly the word of the officers and the auditors to the point of, I'm not absolutely, obviously, and there may well be questions about individual items, but I really doubt that they'll make a fundamental change to the face of the accounts at this point in time, and that's the reason why. I'm not keen to defer, but I am keen to give people the opportunity to raise their questions and have them dealt with.
Richard, I understand that. I don't think I can ever remember people getting the accounts, members getting the accounts changed. They might get odd words and explanations changed.
Yes.
But not the fundamentals of the accounts changed. Having said that, I think the point still has to be made that members do have to have the opportunity to read and hopefully to understand the accounts before they're actually approved. Okay. I want to make one other comment on the paper we've got here, which relates back in some ways to the pie chart on page 3 of the accounts, which relates specifically to the question of income. It's been a concern of mine for a number of years that we're very good at auditing expenditure. I'm not so sure that we actually manage to audit income. I'm not talking about council tax and business rates and that sort of stuff. Very easy. That's very easy. There are significant amounts of money made available by government for all sorts of projects, some of which the council will be invited to bid for, some of which we will get a share of. I, as a member, have no idea and can't can't monitor all of those government announcements as to what's available. And realistically have no way of knowing whether we have actually bid for that money, whether we've got money out of that announcement, or how it's been, well, how it's been spent. If we've got it, will be shown in the account. But the council will receive regular announcements from government inviting expressions of interest in doing bits of work that come with additional monies. And the decisions as to whether or not we bid for that money are not always taken by members. And I would like to find some way of actually monitoring that source of money. Now, I don't know how other authorities do it, if at all. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's two points I think with this. I mean, one, obviously it would be right in terms of the large sources of money that come into councils in respect of various government monies. In terms of the statutory financial statements, they are once if the council receive the money, then obviously they're accounted for. I don't think we have any particular concerns about any specific items in Barnet's accounts. What we look for in those contexts is where if money's they're given to the council with conditions, that those conditions are applied properly, and therefore the accounting of the income is applied properly. That's the audit procedures we as external auditors will look at. Clearly, from time to time, internal auditors might look at particular projects and particular grants and how the council is managing the expenditure. So from an external audit viewpoint, we're satisfied that all the monies that the council has received from central government are properly accounted for, deferred where they need to be deferred.
Now, Paul, I understand that, but we had one case a couple of years ago where we lost a couple of £1 million because we forgot to ask for it. Right. And it's also the question of other pots of money that could become available to the council if we apply for them. And I don't know if there is any mechanism in any local authority for actually overseeing that process. You would know.
I think that's very difficult, I must say so. I mean, the whole time government are coming out with grants that you can bid for, there must be about 3 at this moment in time, I think, quite sizable pots of money. But it's entirely up to each local authority, of course, whether they decide they wish to bid for them, and therefore it's not really an auditable matter, I think, because it's a policy matter whether they bid, because if they bid for them, there's no guarantee they're going to get the money anyway. So it's very difficult to track all those. In normal local authority, obviously, the director would recommend, if there were to be a bid, what sort of bid it would be and what it would be. We would read something probably in your corporate plan. But it's, as I say, it's very difficult to actually audit those.
I accept it's difficult. We've now moved to a committee system. Under the cabinet system, the relevant director might have said to his lead member, the government announced this bidding process. Do you think it's worth our while bidding for it? Under the committee system, there isn't a lead member who's got the authority to make that decision. So where does it go? And who is actually making those decisions? But anyhow, I throw that out as a sort of an observation. I'd be interested to see what other people have to say in other discussions. Jeff?
I think it should be the responsibility of the Policy and Resources Committee, which I believe is chaired by the leader of the council. And I would have thought from an officer point of view, it would be a good idea to give somebody the overarching view of all of that, all those opportunities, and to make sure that things aren't falling through the cracks.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. We've actually deferred the item, so we'll have to fix a date. Right, can we move on then to item 8?
Chair, Chairman, how will the pension fund report? Yeah, which we need to.
Sorry. Well, the pension fund report was circulated at the same time as another. This one, which I also received this evening. But this is going to the pension fund committee on the 29th.
That's correct. In terms of the paper that was circulated today, it's simply an update of the original that we sent out with the original pack.
Right.
And there are not many significant changes, and what we've tried to do is highlight within the updated version dated the 21st of July in red all of the changes, which I'm quite happy to take the committee through very quickly. Happy to say overall there are no significant issues in there, but there are one or two things that I'd like to draw to the committee's attention if so wish at this meeting.
Okay. Do you want to quickly run through those?
Thank you, Chairman. So the paper we're looking at is the one of the ones that's got the red highlighted figures as of the 21st of July. Very quickly through to the executive summary on page 5. Overall, our work is substantially complete, and we intend to give a qualified opinion on the pension fund statements for the year ended 31st of March 2015. Since the report was initially issued back in the beginning of July, we have made some good progress in completing some of the outstanding pieces of work. Very briefly, the bank confirmations that we were expecting, we've now got that. The last was received yesterday. And similarly, the work we're doing on the pension fund annual report has now been completed, and there are no significant issues I need to bring to your attention. The third area of work that was outstanding was on specifically on the pension strength balance within the contributions, as I'll very quickly touch on that later on in the report. Moving on to page 6 of that report, again focusing on the red items in there. In terms of the work that we've done on both the pension funds strain as well as the net asset statements, we identified one non-trivial error and one trivial error within the pension funds statements and the net assets respectively. We've highlighted the values within the 2 bullet points there. What I can say is that in terms of our opinion, those 2 balances are not material. And in relation to that, that's one of the decisions the management takes in terms of whether they choose to amend the accounts in respect of those balances. And in this instance, management has decided not to adjust for those balances. And again, it's one of the points that the committee will need to consider management's response in respect of that and approve their recommendation in respect of that. Again, just to emphasize, it is not material for our opinion, so it is standard practice in that sense that in terms of the response from management, which is set out on page and page 15 of the report, which is headed up on adjusted this statement, just sets out a bit more detail on those 2 items that we flagged up. The other few changes to just bring to your attention. At the time the papers were sent out, the draft opinion on the pension fund statement had not been finalised, as we were waiting for further guidance from the Audit Commission. That has now been finalised, and we've included that in this basic pack within Appendix B. The only other item that we flagged up as being outstanding within the report is set out on page 11, the second table, which is relating to the reconciliation of member data as at the year end. Information we received from earlier today confirms that actually that information will be made available to us by Thursday. We don't expect that will cause any significant issue for us in terms of the opinion. So pretty confident that we'll get that information and we should be able to finish that off without any significant issues.
Are those issues going to be sorted out between now and the 29th or
Absolutely, and we can provide an updated position on this for the committee, pension committee colleagues. I'm going to just pause there and simply just take questions in terms of the original report or any updated positions that was circulated.
any questions?
Yes, I can ask a question that's really one of understanding what we're being asked to do, because what we had is an excellent report about the audit and the issues that arose in the audit, which is similar to the report that we had on the general accounts about the audit and the issues that had arisen in the audit, which were very few, which is very different than being asked to approve the accounts, in that you've given us a report on the audit. I have to say, in other bodies that I've been in party to, I've been asked to approve accounts, then I've had a report on the accounts, not just on the audit. That's merely part of the process of approval. And as a new member, the thing I'm confused about is I'm very happy to conclude on the basis of the report of the auditors that the audit has taken place properly. I've read the papers, and they've obviously done the things that they should have done, and that is all fine. But that doesn't tell me that the accounts and the issues in the accounts in terms of how they're explained and presented have actually been dealt with, which I think is the issue that we were coming to earlier. And therefore, I think it's very difficult on the basis of that for any member to say that they understand and are comfortable with the actual accounts, even if they are very comfortable with the audit process of review of those accounts. And therefore, I don't quite understand in the context of this committee what it is that we're being asked to do. If we're being asked to approve the audit, that all makes perfect sense, and the papers are all designed to allow us to do that or confer the auditor's statement properly. But that isn't the same as saying that we understand and are comfortable with the accounts themselves. And I think that's the sort of dilemma which the current system of this committee presents a new member. And I apologise, I wasn't able to be at the training, but I'm not sure the training itself enabled anyone to understand either the pension accounts or the main accounts in a way that they would be comfortable putting their hand up and saying, yes, this is okay. It's just something that the committee may want to reflect on in terms of what it's actually being asked to do.
So as a point of clarity, in terms of the pension funds and accounts, also they are included in members' packs in Appendix A that was distributed. From the view of the Audit Committee are asked to approve the pension fund accounts, and it is with the Audit Committee, not the Pension Funds Committee. In this case, obviously, we have to consider the accounts in Appendix A, along with the ISA 260 report provided by Grant Thornton. The accounts with the pension fund then do go forward to the Pension Fund Committee. And I'm partly convinced it was delivered in the article this one, and they formed part of the pension fund annual statement, and then it's produced those one during the year, and this is one of the key documents that go within it. From a wider governance perspective, obviously the council to issue its final statement of accounts for 13/14. There's only like 3 key statements. The annual governance statement, the audit committee seen and agreed, and the actual statement of accounts that's the item we're going to go into in August, as well as the pension fund statements that are forming part of that overall pack. So as I understand from this perspective, the Audit Committee are being asked to approve the pension funds accounts that are being presented in members' packs. This will then go forward to the Pension Committee on the 29th of May, and then form part of the pension funds annual report that because they've partly getting this to move to confirm that I believe goes up in September.
The annual report has already been circulated, it's in the public domain for consideration by the Pension Fund Committee next week on the 29th. and the pension fund annual report includes the statement of accounts.
They approve the accounts, we're approving the audit. Is that right?
The pension fund terms of reference include approving the annual report, but not the statement of accounts.
So under the audit committee's terms of reference, it says under point 17 to review and approve the annual statement of accounts. And the pension fund is part of the annual accounts.
That's exactly my point, which is the papers that we've been presented with allow us to review the audit, not the accounts. And that
The attachment says the report.
Pension fund accounts is
The pension fund accounts.
I understand that I'm making a different point, which is that in order to review a set of accounts, unless this is simply a rubber stamp, as somebody made the point earlier, in order to review a set of accounts, you need more than the audit findings. In that we're being asked to review material that is complex and quite difficult to understand. And all I'm saying is that in terms of the paperwork that goes, I mean, you found it necessary to put an explanatory forward to the main accounts. I don't think there's an explanatory forward to the pension fund accounts. The pension fund accounts are in two documents. They're quite difficult to tie together because they use different assumptions at different places. The question was asked of the meeting in relation to the £10 million deficit. No one was able to answer that question, despite the fact that it is clearly laid out in the notes to the main accounts in note 45, where there's a detailed explanation of that 10 million difference. And therefore my concern is that if members are being asked to actually approve the accounts rather than simply to observe the audit findings, we need to think for future occasions what papers might actually help members do that.
I think, hearing the point that the council is making, rather than jump to a conclusion on this one, but given the fact that that this meeting takes place so close to the pension fund meeting, would be even helpful as a starting point next year to ensure that alongside this paper you see the annual report. So I think would give you the explanatory context that you would need to.
In fact, I think that it was merely an accident of other matters that the pension fund meeting was supposed to occur a couple of weeks ago and was delayed because of the problems with membership of committees, and therefore the order that this ordinary would take place was the pension fund committee could look at the accounts and then give some comfort to the audit committee that they were actually satisfied with the numbers as a technical matter.
Okay. Right, yeah, the pension fund account is all part of this. Are members happy with the answers they've had on the audit report? Can I try and take that? Yeah? Yes. That deals with that. Can I, having deferred the item, it's been suggested to me that a number of members on this committee are also on the pension fund committee, which is meeting on the 29th, which is a week's time. If we arrange a deferred meeting to follow the pension fund committee, would that make sense? That gives people a week. Only before or well, given the pension fund committee is going to look at the
So if you're on the debate here, you probably only need an hour to consider the accounts again.
Yeah.
So from 6 to 7.
members happy with that.
I think that's
We actually only need
I think that's a reasonable compromise, Chair. A week is a reasonable amount of time to read a document of this sort. We regularly read longer documents in this.
Just remind us again.
29th, it's a week's time. and if we met at 6 o'clock, in practice, it only needs 3 people to be there to approve the accounts. So if you haven't got any questions and you can't come, providing I have at least 3 members present, we will satisfy all our standing orders. Sorry.
And if there are any questions, they can be
Yeah.
Yeah, the members briefing at 6 o'clock on children's services.
I think that is going to be cancelled anyway.
I don't know, that's still putting my diary.
Well, it's we think that's been cancelled.
But I made a note.
Okay. Right, so we're going to